For a long time, I believed meditation was a practice reserved for special people, people calmer than me, wiser, more disciplined. I used to see them in photos, sitting perfectly still, eyes closed, wearing serene expressions, as if they had discovered some hidden truth of the world. I, on the other hand, had a mind that moved too fast, a body constantly restless, and a persistent uneasiness in my chest. From the outside, meditation seemed like a foreign territory. But during a period when I felt emotionally and mentally exhausted, I sensed the need to try something different. That's how my journey began. The first step wasn't a dramatic decision, but a quiet curiosity. One evening, after a tiring day, I randomly watched a short video about meditation. The person speaking said something that stayed with me. Meditation is not about controlling your thoughts. It's about not letting them control you. I paused. It was the first time someone framed meditation in a way that made sense to me. I didn't have to stop my thoughts. I just had to learn not to get lost in them. That felt possible. The next day, I decided to try. I sat in a corner of my room on the floor, with my back against the wall. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. At first, everything was uncomfortable. The position, the silence, my own thoughts. My mind seemed threatened by this pause, and began producing ideas at an overwhelming speed. I remembered things I had to do, old conversations, future events. When I realized I was drifting away from the present moment, I blamed myself. I thought that meant I was doing something wrong. But after several unsuccessful attempts, I noticed something important. There was no successful or unsuccessful session. There were just moments when I was present and moments when I wasn't, and that was perfectly normal. So I began to change my approach. I no longer viewed my thoughts as enemies. I viewed them as waves. They came, rose, broke, and disappeared. All I had to do was sit on the shore. A decisive moment for me was realizing that breathing is the simplest and most profound anchor. When I focused on the air entering and leaving my body, it felt as if an inner space was forming. It wasn't always a quiet space, but it was mine. Sometimes my breathing felt shallow, other times deep, but slowly I learned not to judge it tonally, to observe it. At first, meditating for 5 minutes was a challenge. Those 5 minutes felt like hours, but over time, something began to shift subtly. My mind wasn't as agitated anymore, or, more accurately, I wasn't agitated along with it. The thoughts were still there, sometimes even more insistent, but a small yet essential distance formed between them and me. That distance gave me the freedom to choose whether to follow them or not. As meditation became a habit, I started noticing its effects in my everyday life. If before I reacted immediately to any unpleasant stimulus, now there appeared a moment of pause. In that moment, I could breathe, observe what was happening inside me, and respond more consciously. It was a revelation. Meditation wasn't just about the minutes I spent with my eyes closed, it was about the way I lived the rest of the day. One morning, I tried meditating outdoors in a park. It was cool, and the wind gently moved through the trees. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. This time, the sounds around me didn't bother me like they did at home. On the contrary, I felt them as part of the experience. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, footsteps passing by. It was as if meditation wasn't trying to separate me from the world, but to connect me to it in a different way. I realized that silence doesn't mean the absence of noise, it means the absence of resistance to it. After a few weeks, I began using a guided meditation app. Not because I was unable to meditate alone, but because sometimes I needed direction. The calm voice telling me return to your breath or observe without judging helped me stay grounded, but I was careful not to become dependent on it. I wanted meditation to remain an inner space, not an externally controlled activity. Another thing I learned was that posture matters, but it isn't everything. I used to think I had to sit in the lotus position with perfect posture and my hands in some mystical gesture. The truth is that meditating correctly is not about the position of the body, but about the quality of attention. Sometimes I meditated on a chair, other times on the couch, and sometimes in bed, in the morning before getting up. As long as I was present and aware, meditation worked. At some point, I discovered moving meditation. When I walked, I tried to feel the contact of my feet with the ground, the movement of my body, the rhythm of my steps. My usual walks became moments of deep presence. I noticed the world around me differently. The colors looked brighter, the air felt fresher, the people more real. It was as if I was living more of what I had already lived before, but without noticing. Over time, I understood something fundamental. Meditation didn't turn me into someone else. It helped me become myself in a more authentic way. It didn't magically change my life, but it changed how I perceived it, and that made all the difference. There were also days when I didn't feel like meditating. Days when my mind was chaotic, my body tired, and my emotions heavy. But I learned that those were exactly the days when meditation was most useful. I didn't have to feel good to meditate. I just had to show up. To sit there with myself, with everything I was feeling. That was the hardest part, but also the most healing. As the practice became part of my routine, I started feeling a subtle but profound transformation. It wasn't a superficial change, but an inner rearrangement. I became calmer, more present, more attentive. I learned to detach from my thoughts, but also to approach my life more consciously. That's how I started meditating correctly, not through perfection, not through complicated techniques, but through sincerity. Through the desire to meet myself exactly as I am, without masks or expectations. Meditation became a space where I didn't have to perform, but simply exist. A place where I learned to be, not to become. Today, when I think about how scared and confused I was at the beginning, I realize that the hardest part was letting go of the idea that meditation needed to be perfect. In reality, it is a deeply human act, perfect, fragile, and authentic. It is a meeting with myself in the silence between thoughts,